Well, welcome back, listeners, to the Finding Phil podcast. I'm Phil Hendrick, your host, and today I am sporting a tank top and just not looking really presentable for a YouTube video, but I look great for a podcast. So I've got a face made for radio. But anyways, the reason why I'm wearing a tank top right now and man, I may even look a little flush in the face is just, I'm on day 6 of no air conditioning. And I thought about having this window here open just to keep the air moving. The ceiling fan is on right now. That might create a little hum, but, I had to close the window because, lawn care workers and everything like that. So as this episode goes on, I might just be getting a little bit glossy on the face here and everything. So bear with me. I apologize. Anyways, hey, before we get into the episode, I want to say thank you again. Every week I say thank you for being a faithful listener and downloading this podcast or tuning in on YouTube. Thank you so much for doing that. I really want to become more discoverable to others in their recovery and self-discovery. So if you can comment, share, review, rate, all of those things help this show become a little bit more discoverable. So, even if you want to share it on your social media, I would appreciate that. So, but you know what? We're going to get into this. I'm going to actually release this today, the same day I'm recording. Once again, I kind of procrastinated because I typically would work on this in the evenings, and evenings have just been miserable. The house has been so warm and everything, but I decided I was going to go ahead and just get this recorded this morning instead when it's a little bit cooler, a little bit more comfortable. It's funny, I just remembered yesterday at day 5 of no air conditioning, I remembered that I can actually just not wear a shirt. So that wasn't a pleasant sight either. So anyways, well, without further ado, let's get on into the episode. Okay, so today we're going to just ask the question, what's your connection? How are you connecting? I'm going to just go ahead and start off with the verse out of the Bible. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So, of course, if you happen to tune into this episode months or years from now, we're still in the middle of this pandemic with COVID-19. I live in San Antonio, Texas, and they're actually kind of they're dialing in the restrictions a little bit for people's safety, of course, because we've had a spike in COVID cases just in the last few days. We've had a really huge spike. And so, the mayor and the judge for our county, actually made it a mandate again for businesses to require people to wear a mask indoors. And so, it really just kind of puts the kibosh on the whole gathering thing, people getting together, and connecting. Some of the places of business that I've heard that have had some of the more severe cases have actually been like some of the bars, where typically people do get together, they have a few drinks to just kind of let go of the cares of the world, and unfortunately I think they let go of some of the common senses of social distancing and the potential for spreading germs. And so anyways, so that's been kind of the case as well. But here's the deal. People really hit the clubs and the bars as soon as they could because they were desperate for connection, because the connection was missing. In my Celebrate Recovery group, we're still doing our meetings on Zoom. We haven't actually been able to get together in at least our group. We haven't been able to get back into our building yet. So we're still doing our Zoom conference calls, and it is nice that we have that technology to be able to do that. But as we got started yesterday, I was telling my sponsor that, hey, it's starting to really weigh on me. And as a matter of fact, I've wanted to talk about this for several days. I really did plan this episode and actually created some bullet points to reference, because this has really been weighing on me. It's been heavy on my heart that this new reality that we live in, and just the effect it's been having on me personally. Now, there's been a lot of positives, and I'll just touch on that briefly, because I do want to keep an optimistic outlook. For instance, I was so desperate for connection before COVID-19. Well, I don't know if it was so desperate for connection, so desperate to keep myself occupied, and my most natural inclination to keep myself occupied has been with other people. From the time I was old enough to walk around the neighborhood as a child, that's what I did all summer long. As I would get out the house first thing in the morning, go find my friends, and we'd play all day. Just keep myself busy, being connected with other people, doing things with other people. And that's carried on into my adult life. I have always valued alone time, and I think I've always done that well as well. Even as a child, I would sometimes, when the friends couldn't play, okay, let's go for a walk in the woods or whatever. And to this day, I still like a good walk in the woods, or I like to go out to the beach by myself and go fishing for the day. But one of the positives, with the COVID-19, I've shared this before, but has been just the slower pace. It's actually forced me to back away from my ultra busyness of always having to fill up the calendar with something, doing something with someone almost every night of the week. And over the last few months, it's, especially for that first month or two where we were in a real serious lockdown. I mean, it was dinner around the table together with my wife and 3 kids every night of the week. And that was awesome. And I've really enjoyed that. So as soon as people really started getting the, okay, we need to start connecting, we need to use technology to connect. Of course, the church right away started doing live streams, and but then the youth group started saying, hey, let's make sure the students are staying connected, and so they would start having some Zoom calls, and then our church also started doing some Bible studies. Right away, of course, I tried to, after a couple weeks, I got Zoom going for our CR group. But shortly after that, I would say about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, our church started doing some online Bible studies, some Zoom Bible studies. And I right away tried to get connected to one of those. And, long story short, I found myself, despite social distancing and stay-at-home orders and being encouraged to stay at home, I was still figuring out how to get myself back into that routine of busyness every day. And so I recently have kind of dialed that back. I emailed my Bible study leader, say, hey, look, I do have my weekly fellowship with CR. And I think beyond that, I'm just getting myself anxious again by getting myself too busy. So I'm backing out of that Bible study. And but here's the deal. There's this delicate balance of making sure I'm connecting. Why is it so important for us to connect? Well, I went ahead and just did a little bit of Googling on this, on loneliness, for instance. And I'll say this, God and science are very cohesive. They, science, you would think that there's this constant battle between science and God, for instance, evolution versus creation. is this point of contention, but really God works through science way more than conflicts with it, because God created all of it. So I'll say that as we get into this, because basically I found this list of 10 interesting facts about loneliness, and it was on psychologytoday.com. And it's, psychologytoday.com. You can look it up and read through it yourself. It's interesting. And one of the interesting points that they made, and I'd heard this before, is that, you can have a lot of friends, but still feel lonely. You can actually have, I would say that I was at a certain point in my life, this was me. I had lots of friends, but there was nobody close to me that I really connected with. Marriage has been kind of that solution for me, but that's not the solution for everyone. That's one of the other points on that list. You can be married. Actually, I think it said 60% of people married are lonely. So, but I'm very blessed. I do connect with my wife, and I don't struggle too much with loneliness, mostly because I try to connect with my wife regularly, but we also need friends to connect with as well. But the first 5 talk about some of that stuff, but the last 5 out of the 10 facts on that list, it was really interesting. They were all about the physical effects on our bodies that loneliness has. And this is something I heard, I think, on a podcast in the last week or two, and I wish I could remember which one so I could give the credit. But so what's happening to your body when you really are isolated and really lonely, it actually goes back to some of our genetic makeup of a time where humans, we had to really rely on each other if we were living in a tribal situation. It's not too long ago. It was really only a couple hundred years ago or less even that we were still settling the Western United States, Western North America. And so community was really important for safety. And so the body developed this biological response inside of our bodies, inside of our brains with our hormones and all of those responses that happen in there, that if you don't have community to help protect you and keep you safe while you're trying to rest. The whole idea is they work as a team, and you had some people that were protecting, some people that were foraging, and so it reduced the stress level for everybody if everybody worked towards the greater good. You could even hear about how I've also heard that it's said that when you're at a hotel, if you're traveling, I travel for 4 or 5, maybe at the most 6 times a year for work. And when you're in a hotel, I heard you're not really getting true REM sleep because you're in an unfamiliar environment and your body is trying to keep a certain sense of awareness to your environment. So I think that's the same idea. So it's the same idea with loneliness. So your body will go into this stress mode when you are excessively isolated and start to feel lonely. You may not even be conscious of it, but your health can be affected by that. So, God gives us this command in the Bible that we shouldn't give up the gathering of believers, as some are in the habit of doing. You could just say, well, that's all for spiritual benefit. Well, it's for physical benefit too. Like I said, God and science work together. So, it is important for us to connect, and there's science to back that up. Of course, there's spiritual reasons to back that up as well. So do we connect through social media, YouTube, and podcasts like this? Is that really a good source of connection? And, I'm going to say no. So in Proverbs 27:17, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And, you notice it doesn't say as iron sharpens or is sharpened by itself, or as iron is sharpened by another object. So, one person is sharpening another. No, it's a two-way thing. So there's this, it talks about iron sharpening iron. So one person sharpens another, working together. So the connection is a two-way thing, whereas a social media, YouTube, podcast, you could be receiving a lot of encouragement. I mean, look, I have all the best intention for this podcast that I'm doing. It really is something I want to do to help people in their recovery and self-discovery by inviting you to join me in mine. But it's still only a one-way street. With all my best intentions, this is not a true connection, because it's only one way. I hope there's possibility. There's several of you listening or watching this that I've never even met before. So, you see where I'm getting with that. And here's the deal too. I want to make sure you understand something. Social media is a consumer product. It's not a way to connect. It really isn't. As a matter of fact, I think it's had some negative effects on our ability to communicate to one another, to relate to one another, and even how to treat one another. I mean, we could do a whole episode about that. Well, tune into Joe Rogan podcast or the Joe Rogan Experience sometime. You'll hear him really get deep into that. Actually, he and Jocko, the Navy SEAL guy, they were talking about that this week as well. And it's a monster, but there's a lot of benefit to it as well. But it's really a monster. It's a consumer monster. It's all full of clickbait. It's all full of deception. It's all full of not real. Even now, our devices that connect us to the social media are giving us these filters, these masks, these barriers, these, I really don't want you to see my true identity. So here's this filter that I'm going to use to upload my selfie. It's really almost I would say it's the antithesis of connection, of real connection. So don't think that you're staying connected with your friends through social media. Now there could be some tools within it. I mean, we were talking about how Zoom is a way for us to connect during this time. And I think, Facebook is now starting to do that. And there's some ways you can do these one-on-one. But a lot of the time people are using it and posting it live as a live stream. So once again, it's not a real connection where it's like, look, you and I are away from the distractions of the world. We don't really care what other people think because we're sitting together right now having this conversation about what's real in our life right now. And it's just between you and I. So, moving on. So another way that connection is helpful for us, and this is more on the spiritual side of things. It's like, look, we have to keep our joy tank full. There's a numerous amounts in the Bible. It says, rejoice always. I tell you, rejoice. Be full of joy. I did listen to a podcast, and that, like I said, I had already been thinking about this topic for several days, and I was just listening to Recovering Hypocrite podcast with Noel Hakenen. Noel was my guest, actually, about 8 episodes ago or so. You can go back and see that episode is great episode. But Noel had a guest on named Adam Ramsey. He's a pastor in Australia, and they've been friends for some time. And Adam has really made it his mission, the mission of joy. And he does talk about how we can have joy in all circumstances, just like the Bible talks to us. Even how we can be in mourning and still have joy. I mean, we can be in the middle of loss and still have joy. and they really do work together. And the most helpful tool for keeping our joy tank full is continually reminding ourselves of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I'll say that again. The most useful tool for us to be able to keep joy in our life, joy in our heart, is to continually remind ourselves the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the source of all of our joy, and so one of the best ways we're able to be reminded of the gospel of Jesus Christ is through connecting in corporate worship and the gathering of the believers, communion and fellowship. And I got to tell you, I have, a few episodes ago, I talked about how I need more help. I've been going to a counselor for a couple months, and that's been going really good. And I've been really self-aware of my triggers with anger. Anger is the biggest reason why I went back to counseling, because, I was having a hard time really understanding what was triggering my anger and why I would get so angry about little things during weird times. So I had a moment though just yesterday, and I'm a carpenter and I do installations, and I receive the product that I install. I receive it at home, store it, and then I take it to the customer and install it. And so I was loading my truck in the morning, and when I'm doing that, I usually have the front door open. And I have a couple dogs, and my one dog, Max, best dog in the whole wide world, he likes to sit right there in the foyer and keep an eye out when that door is wide open. And I, sometimes I get really annoyed if I happen to have the door open and the neighbor walks by with her beagles. I have a neighbor that almost every morning around that time that I would be loading up, she'll walk by with her beagles. So I already had it in my brain, anyways, well, sure enough, she walks by with walking her beagles through the cul-de-sac, and Max has his very loud bellowing howl. And for whatever reason, despite that Max was just doing what he does every single time, is a very predictable behavior, I just got really angry about it this time. And that was kind of a bummer, because, I don't kick the dog, but I use my foot to manipulate where he needs to go. As I was telling him, yelling at him, go to bed, yelling at him. And there may even have been an expletive in there somewhere, and I'm ashamed of that as well. Well, I had no idea. I was like, there's no good reason why. I mean, a little ornery not having the air conditioning lately, but yesterday morning wasn't that hot. And so I spent some time after that just trying to understand, all right, what was the trigger behind that? What made me get so angry at the dog? And, doing what he always does. And I started thinking about it. I haven't been part of our church's live stream worship service in a month. So 4 weeks ago, Memorial Weekend, I was camping with my son. The next weekend, I was traveling to Atlanta, and I actually have to work on Sunday morning when I'm there doing that. And the weekend after that, I had this severe reaction to this antibiotic that had me laid up in bed for 48 hours plus. And then last weekend, I have no good excuse except for that I had gotten in the habit, just like here it says in Hebrews 10:25, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. So I had gotten myself into this habit of not connecting with my church. And I think that has something to do with it. I was sharing this a little bit last night with my CR group, and somebody made the point, well, it's like, why do you need to go to the church when you are the church? We are the church. And I know what his point was, but my point is I wasn't taking the step. I mean, is Is live streaming a worship service really a good two-way connection? No, not with other people, but it is a transaction with my heart. So when I turn on the the church service live stream with my family, we become a small congregation as we sit around on the couch and we have our communion prepared and set aside and ready to join in that communion celebration as part of that live stream. We're actually creating this transaction in our heart to connect with God, to connect with the gospel of Jesus Christ, to connect with the reminder that there is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. It's a continual unloading of our potential shame. It's a continual reminder of our true identity in Christ. And so that was something I wasn't, it was something that I had been getting out of the practice of. Like I said, this past Sunday had no good excuse, except for it was hot. We didn't have air conditioning. And we had actually worked out in the yard as a family together all day Saturday, or half the day Saturday. We just, my excuse was, I'm tired. I don't want to. I wanted, my flesh just wanted to not commune with God. Interesting. Well, so we have this saying in Celebrate Recovery. That saying goes, it works if you work it. Okay? So we have this plan. We have these 12 steps that we follow. And we remind ourselves that we're going to stay sober if we work these steps. We're going to succeed in our recovery if we work these steps. It works if you work it. Well, the same idea goes for the Word of God. This isn't a rule book. It's actually a love story. But in that love story, we're given these principles, these ideas, these, instructions to follow, that if we follow them, if we work it, it works. What is it working? Well, it's working a life of freedom. It's really a book. It's instructions for freedom is really what this is. I mean, I do like the definition of it being a love letter more than anything. It is a love letter to it. It is God's way of telling us how much he loves us. But what he's trying to get us to do as human beings, as loved children, is he really wants nothing more than for us to live free. Going back to the statement I've learned over the last few weeks as I've tried to understand the concept of shame a little bit more. We could read some of these instructions and it could produce this feeling of guilt or possibly just conviction, we might say. But it is not to produce shame. Because I said it earlier, there is now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. Guilt tells us we did something wrong. Shame tells us we are wrong. The Bible tells us we've done something wrong. All have fallen short. All have sinned. But the gospel of Jesus Christ does not say we are wrong. The gospel of Jesus Christ says we are free. We are free of condemnation for our sin. We are free of shame. And that motivates us to live in our freedom, to avoid the things that trapped us into feeling shame. Again, so we don't do good to earn God's love. We do good because we are loved. So that's just a little bit of evangelism, I guess you could call it. If you don't understand the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you'd like to learn more about that, hey, message me. If you'd like to hear an episode where maybe just myself or maybe my wife and I together or another guest, if you really would like us to get into the saving gospel of Jesus Christ, hey, message us back. We can get into that. I don't think that would be anti-recovery podcast. That would actually be very pro-recovery podcast. But I think I've made the assumption that most of my audience already understands that. But, if you'd like to learn more, message me, comment, email me at findingphilpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, we could possibly just correspond privately, or we could possibly turn that into a episode. So, well, I appreciate you all tuning in again this week. Tune in again next week. I'm talking to Buck again about getting our series of the 12 Steps of Recovery, our monthly series, working through one step at a time. So next week, we're going to dive into step number 1 of the 12 Steps of Recovery. So thanks again. Tune in next week. We love you guys, and God bless.